So my earliest memory is walking to my mother's village and seeing abandoned tanks on the sides of the road, and then walking to the village and seeing that everything had been totally devastated by the war. I guess the fondest memory I have of those early years is living with grandma, because my dad was at re-education camp. So I grew up with my grandmother, and every morning she would wake me up and we would walk out into the fields before the sunrise, and she would put her hand on my shoulder and would always say, "Tree, keep your eyes on the sun and let the light of the sun fill your life with light." And I always look forward to waking up in the morning and having this daily ritual with grandma. But then one day, with my grandmother, instead of walking out into the fields to see the sun, she took me to a different path out to the main road. And she was trembling and tears started to fall from her eyes. And I asked Grandma, "Where are we going? Why aren't we going to see the sunrise?" And she said the sun would not rise today. And I didn't understand. And then she started to cry, and we got to the main road. And then she starts touching my face and then my shoulders. And she says, "Do not forget Grandma." And a vehicle came and she placed me on the vehicle, and it took me away, and seeing just grandmother standing there in tears. And that's when I was dawned on me that there's something was going on. My dad took me onto the boat itself, and there was a little manhole at the front, and he snuck me in there and then sealed up the door, the cabin. And I think only then did my dad learn that Mum and my two younger brother wasn't there. She was just so afraid that she decided the last minute to stay behind and keep the two boys. My uncle had planned the whole trip. He had been planning the escape for 6 years, I think. He knew about this island, this refugee island. He's saying that would be the first place. But the whole intention was to go further, all the way to Australia. We faced quite a large storm, like a typhoon, which battered the boat. They didn't have any control of the boat anymore. And for 3 days it rained and thunder. Until the fourth morning, the boat hit a sandbar that protected this island. And only then could my dad went and got me out of this hole. So he threw me into the water. And then the boat was falling apart anyway, so he took a plank off the boat and set me at the front, and he at the back, and swam in. But then the first thing that happened was we're surrounded by soldiers, people with machine guns, and they began to tie all the boys up, those who came in with their fathers. But every night in the darkness, we had no shelter, but every night they would begin with the children. They lead the children to a warehouse, and then they would strip search the children. And I learned much later, 20 years later, that some of the older women had to step in for the younger girls because they were being harmed. So quite a few women were raped. Well, once they'd done what they wanted to do with us, I think they released us to the United Nations. We arrived at Melbourne Airport and was taken on a bus to the Midway Hostel in Maribyrnong. And it was March and it was freezing cold. But the most special thing that happens as soon as we arrived, it was just people everywhere, and people came and clothes, and my sister and I was enrolled to a school in the centre, and local people helped my dad find work. It meant that my sister and I were in a safe place for healing to begin to happen in our lives. If I arrive in Australia now, I think I would be in a detention centre.
It is the policy and practice of the Australian government to intercept any vessel that is seeking to illegally enter Australia and safely remove it beyond our waters. If you travel by boat without a visa, you will not make Australia home.
In the 80s, there was much more leadership, or leadership that was much more compassionate. Meeting with Malcolm Fraser recently, he also told me that when boats do arrive to Australia, direct to Australia, he would ring up people in that area and say, make sure that they are clothed, that they are fed, and that they've got a safe place to stay. And it's that kind of leadership that we don't have now. And I think that's the big difference. How do you change this debate? How do you change conversations? To do something symbolic and to do something big will hopefully give me the platform to engage in more positive conversations. I knew that maybe one way is for me to say thank you to Australia. And I wanted to walk to Canberra to say thank you. So 3 asylum seekers signed up to walk. And none of us had any training, and none of us have ever walked very far. and so we walked during Lent, during Easter time. And for the asylum seeker, this is the first Anglo, stranger's home that they've ever been into. But to go from home to home for 30-something days and just being loved by people was just the most overwhelming experience. And I think that was probably the best experience for the whole walk. It gave them a lot of hope that Australia can change in its way of responding to refugees and asylum seeker if they had a chance just to meet the real person. So I arrived at Ho Chi Minh Airport, and overwhelmed by just the vast number of people at the airport, and just frightened by feeling really lost. And I didn't recognize any of my relatives. And so I stood there at the entrance for a long time, and then suddenly I recognized my grandmother, and she broke through the barrier and running towards me with security guards running after her. And then she ran and she embraced me, and she was only up to my chin. And I got on my knees and embraced Grandma, and she starts touching my face and my shoulders, and she says, "Is that you, Tree?" And I say, "Yes, Grandma." And she says, "Welcome home." So it was a most beautiful moment for me, because it was the distance have now closed up. The moment, the time when we departed, and this reunion, it's just closed that gap. And I spent many days with Grandmother walking out into the fields and looking at the sunrise, and Grandma saying to me, "Keep your eyes on the sun." And I could say to Grandma, "My eyes is on the sun." And it's just was very special to be able to be reunited with Grandma.